Hello everyone. Welcome to my presentation on observation, interviewing, and conferencing. This session, much like the previous one on RTI, is a bridge between regular and special education because observation is a powerful tool in each area, much like RTI is a powerful tool in regular and special ed. I'm going to focus more on the process of observing because in my experience, as a methods instructor and observing teachers, and who has seen lesson plans by many pre-service teachers who believe that simply walking around the room while children work counts as formative assessment. It doesn't, unless you're doing it correctly. In this session, you are going to read three resources, Chapter 8 in Cohen and Spencer, and I have that link right here in the assignments. You're going to read Formative Assessment that truly informs instruction, which is more about formative assessment, and it includes observation, and an article by about regular ed observation. Read Observation Assessment, if I saw it, does it count? So those are the three articles that you're going to look at as part of this session, part of this unit. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the highlights of each of those resources. In Cohen and Spencer, they talk about, or they write about planning to observe, and they go through what the process should look like. Creating observation questions, defining an event or behavior, location, where are you going to do this observation, documentation, and they give at least 9 ways of recording data, which I'm going to mention later. And I'm not going to go through these, I'm just going to point them out to you, so you need to go into the chapter and read them. Accuracy, your observations have to be accurate. Are they reliable? Are they consistent? Multiple observations. Like anything in assessment, we don't take one assessment as being the be all and end all. We have to have multiple assessments, and we have to have multiple observations before we can make any valid decisions. And integration, they have to be integrated with other kinds of assessments. So your observations have to be integrated with a exit ticket, with a fist to 5, thumbs up, thumbs down. So they have to be integrated. So that's in Cohen and Spencer. And they also list 10 different types of observations: anecdotal records, running records, event recordings, duration recordings, latency recording, interval recording, rating scales, and checklists. Now, some of these are on the special ed test that you have coming up in this session. Several of them are, at least 1 or 2 are in your vocabulary in your own words. So make sure you know the difference between all this. Some of them are similar. So you need to know the difference between all those 10 different methods of observing. And then Cohen and Spencer also talk about threats to reliability. Observations need to be reliable also. Errors of omission, missing or leaving out things. Errors of commission, adding something that really didn't happen. Errors of transmission, recording in an improper sequence. And observer drift, I like this, when you're distracted, which happens easily, and you start recording something else rather than what you should be recording. And then reactivity, putting on a show for the observer, changing the behavior, and they talk about obtrusive and unobtrusive, and it's the being observed actually changes the behavior. Anyone who has been observed knows that. When the principal walks into a teacher's classroom and observes the kid, I know this from experience, the kids behave. It's not, so you don't really get to see how a teacher reacts to misbehavior, or how a teacher redirects off-task behavior. So that's another threat to reliability. In the NCTE article, National Council of Teachers of English, they write about careful observation being the foundation of a teacher's assessment work. Teachers who observe students engage in language use and learning how to know their students' strengths and challenges, and are then able to plan supportive classroom learning experiences. Learning to observe closely to see beyond assumptions and predictions is central to development of a formative assessment stance. Observations take many forms, and they give, I think, 3 of them. In field notes, running record, and miscue analysis. Many of you have probably been exposed to that already. I know when I taught one of the reading courses in your graduate program, we did running records and miscue analysis. And checklists and observation guides. Again, there's checklists again. I used to get a little annoyed when my method students claimed they were going to observe their students' work as a way to form assessment and to inform instruction, and for students to inform their learning. And it takes more than just walking around in the classroom to do it effectively. White gives some suggestions for making this walking around more structured and therefore more useful. She talks about describing what happens without judgment or analysis, and that's just writing down the data, pulling your ego out of it, leaving it at the door or at home, recording the date, the student's name, context of the learning experience. For example, October 3rd, the class was designing an experiment to test variables and contribute to corrosion. This next one I think is the biggest. Have a copy of your learning targets on hand. I think if you're going to make a checklist or you're going to make an observation form, then you need to always have at the top the learning targets, and your observation is in line with how close or how the student is doing as far as mastering those learning targets. Give yourself time to observe regularly, particularly on learning goals that are challenging for the learners. And allow yourself to be proud when you see learning growth and success. Share your pride with the learners. Describe what you are seeing and hearing to indicate proficiency. This is the joy of assessment that leads to student confidence, hope, and investment. I've also shared other resources and ancillary materials, and I'm going to show you those right now. One of them is a long read. It's another chapter on Salvia, from Salvia et al., which we used their chapter 12. So this is a chapter on observation. If you click on it, it will take you there. In my Google Documents, there it is. It's rather long, but if you want more information on observing, that's something you should download and keep as a resource for when you're teaching. This article, O'Keefe, The Habit of Kid Watching, it's an old article. I think it's about 20 years old. But again, it's a regular teacher's view of observing, and it gives you some tips using a clipboard and making kid watching a habit. And this last resource is a resource for observing, and it's got a lot of great. It's got forms in it. It's got articles in it, and you can see the amount of resources: observation tracking system, observation tool, peer observation, and informal feedback. Good stuff. So again, that's for you. Download it. There are downloadable resources there for you to use and become better at observing. So the last line of the white, one of the white bullets, is a theme that will run through this course. Assessment needs to be part of a student's learning process. Some people have now coined the term assessment as learning. Assessment of learning, assessment for learning, and assessment as learning. And we need to move gradually from of to as. I like that, from of to as. And so students can answer those three questions, which you'll hear me repeat over and over again in this course. Where am I going? All right, so they know what their learning targets are. Where am I now? They know through a formative assessment exactly where they are. And third, how do I close the gap? Not just, okay, here's where I am. No, how do we close the gap? So those three questions are big. So good observation as assessment can help this happen. That's it.